What's going on, everybody? We are taking over. I am Ricardo Santiago on Instagram and pretty much every other social media channel. It's stylist Ricardo Santiago. We're trying to see if we can get the screen fixed right now to fill the whole screen. Hold on one second here. Wait one sec. Hold on. I'm about to show the rest of it. Look, there's my lovely ceiling. Hold on. Okay, so if it's this way, I think we're good. Okay, so here we go. All right, here you go. Okay, so this is basically gonna have to like live that way. Nope, it's still the same thing. No, yeah, that's better. That's better. Okay, cool. All right, so hey everyone, sorry about that. Again, you know, always technical issues when we're working with things like this, but I want to say thank you again so much for being on here with us and spending your time with us. At Joico, we have so much to offer, and today in particular, we wanted to bring the show to you. So we actually had a full Live Nation tour that was planned for the entire year. We had several events that was going to happen, and unfortunately, we weren't able to follow through with those, as you all know, but the wonderful thing is that today we were actually supposed to be in Boston doing one of these shows, and we decided we couldn't waste this opportunity to still bring all of this knowledge and all of this joy to you. So we're doing this Live Nation tour here live with Behind the Chair, which is fantastic. Now, everything that you're gonna see today, it's all about express services, because at this point in time, we're talking about how can we move things along a little quicker in the salon. I personally am someone who is very particular and methodical in their approach. So I actually thought it was kind of funny when they said, hey, we want you to do express services. And I was like, I don't even know what that means myself behind the chair, but I'll do my best to really kind of share what I can with you guys. And what's great about it is that in all of this and the preparation and the practicing for it, I've actually found ways myself of accelerating the way that I work behind the chair, and also just kind of working to integrate some new things with my clients. So what we want to talk about today is gray coverage, right? So in talking about gray coverage, we want to make sure that, guys, this might be like the bread and butter of all clients, right? We're talking about those people who are there in some cases every 2 weeks, you know, for the really picky ones that want to come in, they don't even want to see any kind of regrowth. But most likely you're looking at every 4 to 6 week client, right? So when we're talking about those clients, we want to make sure that we're taking care of them to the best of our abilities. And we want to make sure that we're using products and the right tools that are going to help us to get that coverage the way that we want it. We always hear how difficult it is sometimes to get proper gray coverage. And I can tell you right now, a lot of times I get messages and stuff from clients where they're like, oh, listen, I don't know, I feel like you changed my formula. Is there something different? Like, I just feel like the color's not lasting as long. Well, that's one of the first kind of myths that I want to dispel if we can, just kind of telling those clients, hey, listen, look beyond that first little bit of regrowth that you're seeing coming in. The color's not fading, your roots are just growing in, right? So that's like the first thing that I always tell my clients is check the mirror, make sure if you see color fading beyond your regrowth, then I will do what I can to fix it. But if not, that's just your roots growing in, and that's okay, right? So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk a little bit about how to tackle that long regrowth, right? So we might have some clients that are coming in, and I thought it'd be great to just kind of give you this visual to start out. So I actually lightened out these roots, and what I wanted to do is kind of give you a good representation of what it looked like to be to have gray regrowth, right? So give me one second. This, I think, could be what a lot of us might experience right now, and this is what our result is here. So I'm going to talk about formulations, and give me one second. I'm going to try to turn the camera around so that we can get a better view of this. There's me again. Here we go. Okay. So this is pretty much what we are trying to work towards. And what I like to do is I always want to make sure that my client is not just leaving with this really just one note color, right? I feel like it's really important to offer them some kind of dimension. So what I want to talk about is how to give them that dimension in a short time frame. Okay, so we're going to address overgrown, stretched out roots, and we're also going to address quick dimension. So here you see two different versions of styling on this, right? And we're actually going to be posting the formulas. I'll tell you them right now really quick. It's only 3 formulas, and this is a kind of a rule for me. So I'm actually calling this technique my rule of thirds, which incorporates to the sectioning. You know I have to have visuals. If you've watched any of my lives so far, you know I have visuals. So the sectioning talks about thirds, and then also the formulations, because we're using 3 colors. So we're basically working with a base formula and then a low light and a highlight, because I think that those always work best together. Now, what we did here is you could see how that dimension works. And what I like to do is I always show my clients when I've finished with an application, I love to show them their hair when it's smooth and straight, because one thing that I don't want to do is immediately throw some curls in their hair and they don't get to see what it really looks like the way that they're going to be wearing their hair, which is the majority of the time, probably more on the straight side. Not every client is going to curl their hair every day, right? So I feel like this is a good representation to show that dimension, to show that blend, and see how well it can actually all kind of live together. And you can see how those highs and lows really kind of marry together here through those ends, and how it blurs out from that root. And then we did do a wavy example here as well in the back quadrant, just to show again how dimensional it is. Obviously, when we throw the curl in there, that starts to pull some of that dimension out. So we just wanted to show some of that. Now, let's get into doing some hair, right? Because this is what it's all about. Now, I've done the back quadrant already, retouched these roots. And I did that because you can only watch somebody apply a root formula for so long, right? So I wanted to speed this up a little bit and show you guys how we can do this a little bit quicker. Now, the first step, and this is hands down the most important one, before you start any of your services, you have to prep the hair properly, right? So I'm going to apply Defy Damage Pro Series 1. This is our bond optimizing spray. That means it protects, it strengthens, and it rebuilds those bonds from the inside out throughout the entire service. The other thing that it does that's unique, I think, as well, is it's gonna offer you better lift without having to change anything on your formula, so you can keep it at a low developer and get a higher bump. You're also gonna get better color deposit. And that means with your grays as well. So your clients who have those really stubborn grays, you'd be surprised if you prep your hair first with Defy Damage, how much better that color might stick on to those stubborn grays. So I've already done the back portion. I'm just gonna go ahead and spray this portion here. And so you wanna give the can a really good shake, and then short bursts down the hair. And it works really quickly. You can see I'm only taking about 3 to 4 sections per quadrant. So this is about 1 to 1.5 inches each. And then every time I'm spraying, you can see I'm still shaking that can up, right? And that's it. So once you've sprayed it through, then I personally like to grab like a natural bristle brush and then just really distribute that product evenly, and we're good to go. That's it. It's that fast, that easy. And now the hair is prepped and ready for your color. Now, when we're talking about covering something with this much regrowth, then you have to factor something in, right? You're probably gonna deal with a bit of a line of demarcation, particularly when you're talking about an actual living human being versus our mannequin here. So what you wanna do is potentially, this just depends on what kind of process you're doing. If you're strictly depositing, you might be okay. But if you have any kind of lift, that's gonna happen with that. So let's say they're a little bit lighter through here, through whatever residual natural is left in their natural base here with that gray percentage, you probably are gonna have to create a formula for the first ½ inch or so, and then a separate formula for the rest of that regrowth, because you're going to get a nice natural bump right on that base just because of the heat that's coming off from that scalp. But for the rest of that hair, how are we going to catch that up? One of the things you can do is you can always bump your formula by increasing your developer. So maybe do a 10 volume at the root and then 20 through the mids and ends. Or when you're doing gray coverage, you got to do 20 at the root because 20 is your ideal developer when you're doing gray coverage. And then maybe bump out to a 30 through the mids to ends so that you can balance it out. The other thing is just bump your formula instead by changing your color. So maybe you're doing a level 5 at the root, throw in some level 6 through the next portion, and then melt them together so that way it creates a nice fluid blend. Now, what I like to do is first pick the right tool. So you can see I actually have a pretty wide brush versus my standard size brush here, right? So using a wider brush is going to allow me to get more coverage so I can work faster this way, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and put that color on. So the other thing that you can do also, forgot to mention that, is you can put that lower developer on first and then go on and put the second one, or you can apply the same formula off the base, get that everywhere, and then go back through and do the base just as you would in some cases when you're trying to lift someone to like a pale blonde with a lightener and they've got outstretched roots. So that's just another tip that you can do with that. Now, what I'm going to do is I started playing with how big a sections could I take to really be able to work the product through well and get good coverage. And I found typically what I used to do is I would take sections that were about 1/8 of an inch thick, right? So that's actually pretty fine. And the reason that I would do that is because I was always taught that if you take what we call newspaper sections, you know, nice and fine, you'll get better coverage. And that is true. But what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to go about 1/4 of an inch. And just by increasing to 1/4 of an inch versus 1/8 of an inch, that should, in theory, double my speed, right? So what you want to do is make sure that you've got a good firm bristle brush. So this, I'm actually using feather bristles versus the standard because this holds color a little bit better and it presses it through better as well. And what you want to see when you take that through and you deposit that color, when you lift to that next section, if you can see that color showing through to the other side, that means that you've already got the saturation pushed through. So when you come back on the underneath, and we're touching it up as on that underneath as well, now I know that I'm getting perfect saturation on there and I'm not going to have any issues. So again, just increasing the size of the section that I'm working helps me to work a little bit faster. And then also notice too, I take my slice before I put that color on. If you put the color on and then try to take your slice, you could run into an issue where you have a hard time getting a nice clean slice. So do it before while it's still dry and it'll be easier. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can always take the bottle approach, right? So how many of you guys actually use color bottles for a root application? Probably not many, right? But believe it or not, it actually works really well. And one of the things that we do, so we kind of just started experimenting and doing a few little hacks, if you would, to try to find ways to speed up the process. And one of the things that we did is we found, I love these Joico applicator bottles, but you see how small that hole is on that nozzle there? What I wanted to do is find a way to work a little bit faster. So we actually just nipped off a little bit of the end at an angle and then smoothed it out. So now I can get quicker color distribution and better, faster deposit, just doing that quick little tip. Another thing that we do is when we're getting the color in, you want to start with your developer first. You know, it works best with a scale. So start with your developer first, weigh it out, put your color in. And I actually found these little glass rocks that we use for like little decorative things in like vases and bowls and stuff like that. And I dropped a couple of them in there, and that actually, you can hear it. Actually, it just sounds like color in there, but I promise there's little rocks in here. It's kind of like a can of hair shake, right? So I put that in there, and it's like also like a shaker bottle, like a muscle, like a protein drink shaker bottle. That just helps to break that color up and separate it a little bit easier. And now I can go through also, you know, feel free to just get that color tapped down to the bottom. It's fine. She doesn't feel anything. And then we're gonna go ahead and take our slice and do the same thing. Now, when you're doing it this way, what you wanna do is make sure that you apply liberally right at that base. And then we're gonna lift up and over, and then we're just gonna stretch that through. So once you've done that, then you're gonna take your thumb and get your saturation. Okay, so if you do that, that's a slowed down version. Here we go. This is kind of the way that I would be doing it in the salon. Just give it a line here. And as I'm applying, I am distributing at the same time. I don't usually rip through my client's hair like that. Promise, I'm just trying to be fast for you guys. And just like that, you can actually speed yourself up a pretty good amount, right? So I think that it's always a great thing to do is try to find different ways, kind of pushing the envelope to see what creative ways can we do something, how can we use tools that we already have at our disposal, and just really speed ourselves up, find a way to change the normal mindset of things, right? I will say this, I think I always have to give praise to my friend and teammate here, Larissa, because she does a great job of doing that just in the simplest of ways, changing the way that she, instead of taking a weave, will maybe do a zigzag, or the way that she folds her foils, things like that. You know, it's just trying to think in a different way. And honestly, I don't necessarily have that mindset myself, but I'm thankful that I work with a great teammate, that being my wife, who does have that kind of mind, and she helps me to kind of think outside of the box. Sometimes I'm very much an in the box thinker a lot of times. I'm very practical. So look, just like that, we've got that root touch up done. Now, I know you can see a couple of things. First off, I didn't stretch it through yet. That's okay. There's a reason for that going into the next part of the technique. Second is I made a mess on her face. So I'm gonna clean that up right away. And this is also just a great tip with those clients, especially when they're getting a dark color put on, is if you can go in right away and wipe off that excess color off of their hairline and off their skin, then it doesn't get a chance to set, and then you don't have to worry about staining. I personally cannot stand when I see somebody walking around looking like Eddie Munster with an artificial hairline. You know what I'm talking about? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like the drawn in widow's peak, because somebody forgot to wipe off that color quick enough, right? So I like to just do that, right? This is a personal tip. That's what I do. You don't have to do it, but that's something that I do. Now, another thing that also drives me wild, right, is when your client has a few of those really kind of, I would say, those stubborn little grays, right, that they like to just push straight out, right? And they're really short and they're hard to get in with the rest of the hair. So something that I like to do is you can either use like your, and this is like a known tip, but I like to take either like a perm paper, or in this case, what we do is I love to use these Joico artistry foils right here, right? They're a good size. They're actually like a 7 by 14 inch. Here's a box of them right here, actually. And in between each foil, there's a piece of these papers to separate, keep the foils nice and clean, and also keeps them level. But these work really well to just press into that hairline right there. And if you do that and you press that up right up to the hairline, that'll take that stubborn little gray that's just shooting off, not wanting to lay down with the rest of its friends, and force it to, it's like a weighted blanket. And it puts it right to sleep, just lays it right down with the rest of them. So that's just another tip that I like to do with that. Now, let's get into the next thing, which is the actual creating dimension, right? So when we're creating dimension, again, when I'm talking about my rule of thirds, a good friend of mine, Paul Watts, who's actually on our Joico Europe design team, he put this reference out that when I heard it, I felt like it was just genius. I'm like, why didn't I think of that before? Because I've always worked that way, but I never really had an explanation for it. And he likes to work with 3 formulas as well when he's doing contouring. And I love to contour when I'm working in color because I like to look at the features of my client and accent certain things and also kind of blend in certain things. So that depth is going to help to maybe like hide something, whereas the highlight is going to help to expose something that I want to expose. And what he used as a reference is actually a makeup palette, a makeup contour kit. So I thought that was so genius to hear that. The makeup contour kit always has the 3 colors. You have kind of like your middle tone, and then you have a low for that low contour, and then the highlighter to really kind of expose certain things. So we're kind of incorporating the same thing here. And what I like to do with my rule of thirds technique is I actually take about every 1 inch, I'm gonna alternate my low light and my highlight. So every inch I'm gonna put a nice thick weave. We call these statement pieces, right? Because they're not your standard soft, nice blended weaves. These are nice, thick, kind of a chunky weave, right? So we're gonna work with that. And then you'll see if you do these in quadrants that they end up lining up. So here we have a visual of what I did on the other side here, where I actually placed the low light down first, right at that hairline. And then I did 2 highlights back to back, and then another low light, and then 2 highlights back to back. I actually had enough space on the mannequin that I put 1 more low light on the very top on both the front and the back quadrants, but I didn't have space to do it here on the drawing. So we're gonna show that right now, okay? So here's how we would do that is we're gonna take this first, we're gonna go diagonal back right here, right? So this is going diagonal back towards the nape. And we're just gonna take that slice right there. Okay, now the first thing I need to do is make sure that I'm getting the rest of the coverage that I need right here. But what else I'm gonna do here is I like to make sure that I really soften that line out. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is actually apply a good amount of color on here. And I'm gonna use my hands to blur out that line. That's gonna keep the hair from having a line of demarcation. I used a deeper tone at the root than I actually did that the mannequin's actual color is. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to show that if you stretch that root in this manner, you can blur that line out effectively so that it looks like you went in and put in more of a shadow root, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna come in and I'm gonna start building up some product, stretching it from the root and bring it down to where my line of demarcation is. And then once I've got a good buildup there, by pressing it in like this, I know I'm getting good saturation. You see that buildup? So now I'm just gonna switch my fingers and I'm gonna start stretching that out. So you wanna make sure that you're not just working up and down, but you're working side to side as well. That's really important. That's a key note because if you don't work side to side, you're not gonna have even saturation. We know that as you get further into your knuckles, you actually start to lose some of that saturation. So we do that, right? We've now blurred that color out. And I know some of you are like, well, how are you gonna color into that? It's okay, I've got a remedy for that. So we're gonna take these nice thick statement pieces here, right? And just a couple of weaves there. And then again, using these massive artistry foils. Another thing that's going to help you to work faster, just using these big foils. You saw a great example on Jill's live. She likes to use these nice big wide foils. I like to do the same thing. This is going to help you to take bigger sections and work a lot faster. So we're just going to go ahead and place this in. And I'm actually going to go in with that low light first, like I said before. I got to label the bowls or else you'll mess them up. So I'm gonna go from that blend line that I had down and then just kind of feather that up and let those two kind of marry together. Where I feathered that up is also where I started to blur that line out. So that means that they're gonna softly combine right there. And then when I fold it, I wanna make sure that I'm not folding this into that top and transferring anything. So I'm gonna make sure that I stop just short of it. And then I can go ahead and fold my foil. There we go. Okay, now, in case you have a question about our formulas, I know we've probably been posting them here, but just in case, this is our base formula. I'm using Joico's Youth Lock. This is designed for 100% gray coverage. We have the NN, NNA, and NNG series in that. I'm using the NNG as my base in the level 6. And then I'm also using our demi cream, right? So this is a demi permanent cream-based color that will also give you gray coverage and gray blending, right? So this is fantastic because if you do have those stretched out roots, or if you want someone that you just want to blend those roots in really well, grab some DD creams are fantastic for that. But it's also my favorite thing to use when I do low lighting. My other formula that I'm doing here for my highlight is actually our Blonde Life lightener, powder lightener right here. You get 9+ levels of lift. I don't want 9 levels of lift with this. I just want it to be nice and subtly dimensional. So I'm only using 10 volume, right? So we're keeping it nice and light so that way we don't get too much lift out of that. Although if you're not careful, you'll still get like 9 levels of lift out of 10 volume. Okay, so I'm taking my next slice is about 1 inch wide, right? So it's going to be every 3 inches, we're going to have 3 foils. And let's get a little bit more of this base formula on here. We're going to stretch that, like I said before. And one other thing that I want to make sure that I mention to you guys is, you know, obviously Joico's doing this event because we have a deep appreciation for education and for all of you. And we want to share some of that great education with all of you. So if you don't already know, we have a fantastic digital database of education that is all available for you right now. And that's available on joico.com. If you haven't been on our website before, I highly recommend that you go and check that out, right? So you can actually go right on there and you're gonna go to the tab, you're gonna do the drop down menu, and there's actually a line down with a link that says Pro Education. You click on that, you're gonna find a nice little library of videos with all kinds of different techniques. It's going to talk about, we've got product knowledge. I was actually fortunate enough to do like our entire Lumishine product knowledge series. So you'll see my ugly face on there quite a bit if you do go on there. And also just some amazing techniques from a lot of the same people that you're going to see right here on this live and some of our top educators in the brand. So make sure that you go and you check that out as well. Again, at Joico, we're just trying to find the best ways that we can to provide you guys with the best that we can in the industry. And that's not just in education, but in all different areas. So you'll notice here what I did is I actually did a little bit of a tease as I went into that. So I stretched that root color down and then teased up and stayed just below that with my lightener. So that way I don't have any intermixing with my lightener to my permanent color at the root. And because we don't want to have that ugly orange transition area. So this kind of just really nicely softens that out. And again, when you're stretching that root the way that I was doing it before, it creates a really nice blend like you saw on the other side there. So no need to worry that it's maybe not gonna blend or connect at all, because I guarantee you that it all blends together quite nicely. P.S. the other side is not toned. So we did those highlights, but we didn't tone them yet for 2 reasons. One of which I wanted to show you how nicely our lightener lifts, like how beautifully Blonde Life will lift to this gorgeous tone, right? And the other thing too is I also wanted to see how much lift I got out of it. Because it is a mannequin, we know how finicky mannequins can be. So I wanted to see how much lift I got out of that before then I formulated to put that color on. Now here's the third the third slice that we're gonna take. This one in particular, once we get above the, I guess, temple area and we go above that recession into the front hairline, I always like to try to grab a little bit from this area right here. So what we're gonna do is take that last inch here, and you're just gonna kind of slightly round forward. So you end up about an inch off the back, but then it only ends up being about a ½ inch off the front right here. Okay, so that's just something that I like to do to make sure that that all blends together nicely. And then we're just gonna keep repeating the process. So I'm gonna split this in half because this is entirely too wide of a section to try to melt that color down. You gotta still make sure, even though you're trying to work smarter, not harder, you still gotta be smart, right? So we're gonna do this. And if any of you all have any questions, we are going to be taking them throughout. So we've got some great associates here from Joico that are able to help answer any questions if you might have any as we go through. But also if you have any directed specifically towards me, like Jill mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of them with Mary a little bit later in the interview. And then we're also going to try to address some of them right now. So
one question that did come through is, will you get spots when incorporating teasing?
Okay, so that's a great question. Will you get any kind of spotting there? I didn't find that I had that issue. And I think that the reason for that is because we are saturating and diffusing that color first. So this is a really important step. If you don't come through first and really saturate that color and drag it down to make sure that you're getting it completely filled within the section that you're working, then you do potentially run the risk of maybe getting some spots. But because I've now diffused that color, then go through and do my teasing, I'm okay. I'm not gonna have any issues with any spotting there. That's a great question.
Will you be showing the afters?
Of course, yes. We'll be showing the afters, not just on, behind, you can find them on Behind the Chair. I'm sure we're gonna have them on there, on Joico's channel as well. And then obviously we're gonna post it on our personal channel. So I'll have mine on mine. Again, my page is Stylist Ricardo Santiago. So again, you can always go on there and feel free to just pop on, reach out, send me a message. We like to connect and talk with our friends in the industry. Another thing too, obviously, that we're talking express services. So we're talking things that you can do quickly, and we're working through this all pretty fast. But if you want some more like in-depth information about gray coverage or anything like that, I actually have a couple of videos that are live on there right now. You can always go and check those out. They live not just on my channel, also on Joico's channel. We have the Golden Hour Glow Technique, which is a unique one that I did. And that also has a nice strong focus on gray coverage. I feel like they gave me gray coverage because I live in Florida and like all the old people come here to retire. So I get tons of gray coverage as it is. So if you're like, oh, why is he doing gray coverage? There you go. I live in Florida.
You can find the videos on Ricardo's Instagram and IGTV, and again, at Stylist Ricardo Santiago. You might also want to check out the angle method there.
Yeah, we got that one too. Now, here's just a quick tip with the teasing, right? So I don't know if you saw that, what I just did, but I did 3 quick, I guess, pushes of my teasing brush. And I'm using, just because I always get the question, this is a pink pewter never let go comb, and this one works really well for the teasing. But I did one short one first, and then I went a little bit lower and pressed that up into that, and then went a little bit lower and pressed that up into that. Once I've done that, and I've got a nice little buildup of teasing here, and what I want to do is actually start from behind that first one and press that back up into that area. The reason that I do it that way is because it gives me a nice consistent buildup right here. And then also when I go to comb it out, because I've kind of teased it up in sections, it's going to allow me to comb it back through in those same sections. So I can start at the ends and work through, and they actually comb out much easier, as you can see here, than if I had just jammed it all up at once. Usually when I do that in a class, everyone's like, oh, you know, that's like a little gentle aha moment, which as an educator, we always feel good when we get those. Obviously, I don't know if any of you just went, oh, so I'm just gonna trust that maybe you did.
as those have been posted in the comments. So please go through and check those out. We'll also post them up when time after they're posted on social.
Yeah. And if anyone has a question as to where that angelic voice is coming from, that's my wife holding the phone, helping me out, as she does so well all the time.
And don't forget to tune in for the next few artists that are lined up. There's also two, I believe, 8 sessions.
Yep.
From the HairJoi chair. So make sure you stay connected so that you can get part of that as well.
Yeah. All right. So essentially what we're doing here is we are going to keep repeating this process, right? So we're just going to keep going from, I just want to make sure I'm good on time. I'm like, let me see, where's my timing? So we're gonna keep going through this and just gonna keep repeating that. So now that I've done this highlight, so you see I did low light, highlight, highlight. I'll take another inch section, I will stretch that root, and then I will repeat and put another low light, another highlight, and then that's it, right? Then you go to the back quadrant and you're gonna repeat the same thing just as we did here. You're gonna take one in the lower nape area right here, you're gonna go diagonal back, and then just continue to repeat. What you'll find is if you keep consistent in taking those 1-inch sections, your placement will actually end up lining up quite easily, and then you'll have a really nice balance. So again, I just want to show you all the finished result over here of what you're going to get right there, right? So we have our curly wavy version with all that dimension in there, right? And that nice blurred out root, right? Because we are stretching that out. And also the same thing here. And I think it's important. I know that we threw a lot of information at you, from the bottles to the whiter brushes to the whiter foils. But again, we're talking about express services, and we're trying to find ways to create these services to work faster. For us behind the chair, we know time is money. And we know that with money, even pennies add up to dollars, right? So every second and every minute that you can save behind the chair, whether it be by opening up the bottle to a slightly larger hole, trying to use a bottle, maybe finding some comfort and speed in that, using a wider brush, using a wider foil, all of these things, right? Using Defy Damage, which will absolutely speed up your process as well. All of these things will add up, and I guarantee you that you'll find that you can do so much more work and work a lot faster and a lot more effective behind the chair when you implement these things. So I think I am nearing the end of my time, I believe. Oh, I have a question. There's a couple.
Did you apply the base on first all over?
Yes. So on this side in particular, I did the base and actually dragged it down a little bit lower than I did over here. Here I was working on showing you more of the demonstration side of it. So here I actually dragged it down the length of where my regrowth was. I did bleach both sides, I promise. So I dragged it down, and then I went through, once I did the entire half, then I went through and put my dimension in. You can always, if you find that, if you've done that and your color and you didn't kind of blur the line out effectively, just add a little bit more color on that spot. And that's where sometimes it's nice to have the bottle, because you can just put a little bit more right on the section that you're working and drag that out a little bit more so you can diffuse that line a little better. Is there another question?
Is everybody loving this? Did anybody take away a tip that you can use in the salon? It'd be awesome to hear what works for you. I think that's it. You're just getting a little love.
All right.
If you guys
Awesome.
like this, show some love, give some hearts to Ricardo. Don't hesitate to reach out to him on Facebook or Instagram at Stylist Ricardo Santiago.
Yep. And we just want to make sure that we note, I said this in the other lives that I did, like the golden hour and stuff like that. So youth lock, again, 100% gray coverage. This is going to be your best plan of attack when you're doing the gray coverage. Also, one other note that I forgot to mention is when we're talking about gray hair, you notice it's not represented in any way on the color wheel, right? Because gray and white is basically like more so the absence of color versus black, which is a level 1. You're not going to put gray or white as like a level 10, right? That's pale yellow. So as you're going back down in levels, make sure that you, and this is just color science, color theory, right? You're filling it back in with all those levels of colors as you go through. So if you're going down to like a level 7, you need to put some yellow, so you need yellow, gold, copper, and then the deeper you get, you'll go copper, red, and then transition into your violets, your greens, your blues, ultimately all the way down. So just remember those little key notes, those color theory things. Those are taking it back to the basics. And if you fill that hair properly, I promise you, you're going to see a better deposit, and you're also going to see better reflection, better shine. You're already getting that in our LumiShine series, and you're just going to see a better result overall and happier clients.